Hi, listeners. Stories have so much power, and so does whoever controls the narrative. It is time that we dissect and analyze these stories. I am Vipul, and this is WokeTales. I'm so excited to start this journey as a podcast host and to bring you stories, themes, and discussions which you may or may not have come across. This is a special week because this is the first episode of WokeTales, and it is week of Cinco de Mayo and Mother's Day weekend. Happy Cinco de Mayo and happy Mother's Day. I want to give a shout out not just to my mom, but all moms. Therefore, for today's episode, I bring you a story from Mexico about a mother who grieved her children and was condemned eternally to not rest in peace. But before I tell you the story, I want to welcome our guest Vanessa, who will dissect and analyze this story with me. Hi Vanessa, welcome to WokeTales.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thank you, Vanessa, for agreeing to do this, and I'm so excited to actually talk to you. I've heard your voice on the podcast before, but but now actually interacting with you.
Yes, I'm so excited.
So Vanessa is one of the co-hosts of the Feminist Mommies podcast, and I hope she brings the feminist and the maternal perspective to the story analysis. Vanessa, I want to say that I love your podcast, and it's absolutely amazing. Even though I am not a parent, I do interact with my nieces on a regular basis. So I feel like it's important for everyone, for all adults, to be conscious about our actions and what we say to or in front of the kids. So Vanessa,
Absolutely.
do you want to give a shout out to your co-host Shannon and tell us a little bit about your podcast?
Yeah, absolutely. And happy Mother's Day to all the moms out there, all those hardworking moms. And one of the most hardworking moms, of course, is my co-host Shannon. So our podcast is called the Feminist Mommies Podcast. We launched this in January of this past year, 2021. And Shannon and I united over Instagram and really over a shared desire to further feminist values within parenting. So Shannon has a really great Instagram account. Her handle is Feminist Momming. And from there, we then created our handle, Feminist Mommies. And our podcast is really about working motherhood, feminism, career. And, some of our most popular topics have been to lean in or lean out. That was really career focused, as well as mom versus dad, traditional gender roles in the home. And our community is really about supporting women. So I'm so excited to be talking to you today on Mother's Day, which is, it's so important to recognize moms and how society values motherhood.
Right, I totally agree, and I'm so glad to be talking to a fellow feminist. So that's great.
Yay! Good to hear that.
So on that note, it's story time. LaLlorona Christian Maria was born to a peasant family in a humble village. She was extraordinarily beautiful with raven black hair and large almond eyes. Her startling beauty captured the attention of both the rich and the poor men of the area. She lived a quiet, modest, virtuous life alone, surviving on her craft-making ability, until she was swept away by the rich Don Nuno, Marquis of Monte Carlos. LaLlorona was a caring woman full of life and love, who married a wealthy man who lavished her with gifts and attention. However, after she bore him 2 sons, he began to change, returning to a life of womanizing and alcohol, often leaving her for months at a time. He seemingly no longer cared for beautiful Maria, even talking about leaving her to marry a woman of his own class. When he did return home, it was only to visit his children, and the devastated Maria began to feel resentment towards the boys. One day, she learned that he was getting married to a famous princess from Spain. In a fit of rage, and to save her sons from the suffering that they would face as impoverished bastard children, she took them to the river and drowned them. As they disappeared downstream, she realized what she has done and broke down into inconsolable grief, running down the streets screaming and wailing. She was plunged into such despair over what she had done that she died of grief right there on the river bank. As she attempted to enter the afterlife, an angel asked her where her children were. She said she didn't know. She was told she must find them before she could rest. So she was forced back to earth and condemned to wander rivers and lakes and streams looking for her children forever. Her restless spirit began to appear, walking the banks of the river when darkness fell. Her weeping and wailing became a curse of night, and people began to be afraid to go out after dark. She was said to have been seen drifting between the trees along the shoreline or floating on the current with her long white gown spread out upon the waters. On many a dark night, people would see her walking along the river bank and crying for her children. And so they no longer spoke of her as Maria, but rather LaLlorona, the weeping woman. Now she is either a temptress or a boogie woman who attacks kids and kidnaps children. Ooh, wow, that was a little intense.
Yeah, that's a interesting one for Mother's Day.
Right, yeah. I mean, it is a little sad story. So yeah, I'm sorry to bring everyone down.
No, but it's good to dissect these things, right? Break them down.
Right. So, Vanessa, what was your first reaction when you heard the story?
I felt it was very intense. Honestly, that's the first word that came to mind when I read this. And as a feminist, so if I'm putting my feminist layer on it, and I don't know if you want me to just dive right in here.
Yeah, no, of course, go ahead.
Okay, so with my feminist hat on, so not necessarily my mothering hat here, but my feminist hat. I mean, the things that struck me right off the bat, the biggest thing was that this whole story seems to be about how a woman's identity and self-worth is directly tied to a man. And so in this case, her husband, right? So she cannot have any happiness on her own. She can't find any personal fulfillment outside of this man. And so when he kind of, turns against her or moves on, she becomes this hysterical woman. She becomes crazy, which we can talk more about as well. Because that's, how so many women are depicted, even in our society today, right? This idea of the hysterical woman.
Right, yes.
The other thing is, at the beginning of the story, I thought immediately, I was like, oh gosh, how the story fixates on her physical attractiveness. And this is really in line. So the interesting thing about this story is it's old, right? And I don't know if you know how old it is. I don't actually know. I'm guessing hundreds of years old.
Right. So I think that has been passed on from generation to generation, and I couldn't find like the original story.
Well, and they change, right? They change so much, and it's like this game of telephone as they're passed along through different generations, and they sort of change and adapt based on sort of what they want people to take away from the story. So my understanding is like this story is told to children to sort of scare them into coming home at night, listening to their parents. Oh, you don't want to be outside. But yeah, so, stories change and adapt, and especially something like a fairy tale. But what I thought was interesting is this story is so old, and it's focusing on her physical attractiveness as being like the only thing that matters. But yet in our society today, a recent study that I actually had found for something to do with our Feminist Mommies podcast, a recent study in the US found the top 3 traits that society today most values by gender. And can you guess what it is for women?
I really don't want to say anything related to physical beauty, but I reckon that would have come up of the most value.
Yes.
Is it?
Yes, it
oh my
is.
God.
It's physical attractiveness. So it's one thing to look at this story and be like, okay, that was a different era when this was created and told and shared and taught. But I mean, it's still in our society today that people still value the things that are being discussed in this story. So, I mean, as a feminist, that is unfortunate, of course. And there's so many other aspects to this story too. I think as you had brought up too, it focuses on her docile qualities, virtuous. You want a woman who is living a quiet, modest life. And then this big, rich, wealthy, brave man sweeps her away as though, it's telling little girls, like, that's what you want.
Right.
You want a man to come and sweep you, a wealthy man, preferably, right?
Of course.
So, I mean, I mean, it's just so interesting because I don't even think that's the point of the story. Right. And I think, maybe you want to take this in a slightly different direction, this conversation, but just layering. There's so many layers to this story that promote this gender inequality and show women as these just sort of sad and crazy and no self-worth, low self-esteem, beyond the mothering aspect of it. Like, just as a woman, this is what it's telling me.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with whatever you're saying. And, like, just doing research for the podcast and just, generally when I read stories, there's always either you are beautiful, virtuous, quiet woman, or you are evil, the bad one.
Yes.
There's no in between, like a human character where you can be nice, but then you can also be angry at something, that's just all of those human characteristics. So why do you have to pick? And she's self-independent because she was doing some handicraft and stuff, but then this guy comes and then he's like, okay, now you don't have to do anything, and then I'll take care of you. And then she has kids, and then her life is all about being a wife and mom, and there's nothing wrong with it. But then when it comes out to that's your only self-worth is the husband, then I think that's a little problematic, especially when this story is told to little kids.
Yes.
Because that might not be the direct message of the story, but it is a underlying message which when they hear, they can subconsciously absorb it.
Absolutely. And I mean, it goes back to what you were talking about, the good versus evil as well. So many fairy tales, and I mean, you can think about the Disney stories as well, the Disney princess stories. It's good versus evil, and it's good women versus evil women. And the other thing that does is, okay, so one of the harmful things is, as you've articulated, it puts women in a box. So you're either this beautiful, modest, virtuous, quiet woman, or you're this loud, ugly, evil woman that, you don't want to be like that, right? But what else it does to women is it pits us against each other, right? It makes there be a good girl and a bad girl.
Right. Yeah.
Which, again, is at the root of feminism here. How we, we're seen as enemies to one another. And that's so unfortunate because, we really should just be supporting one another. But it is one of the most harmful things about the inequality in our society is that they try to put women into boxes and they try to make it seem like if another woman's not in that box, then she is bad.
Right. Yes. And one of the variations of the story, which I didn't narrate, the second woman the husband was planning to marry had a tragic death as well because LaLlorona tries to take revenge from her, which is, like you said, pitting them against each other. So she's competing for the husband and his wealth, but maybe the husband never told her that, oh, I'm married. Maybe he just presented himself to be this like a bachelor, single guy. And we don't know the second woman's story, like what her situation was, or was she lied to, or was she doing it deliberately? And if she is doing deliberately, that's again because society has put it on her that you need a husband, and for that you need to do whatever. And you need like a rich husband to be fulfilled in your life.
Yes.
But a lot of times people, they fight with if their significant other is cheating on them, they kind of always blame the other person.
The woman,
and Single mom gets a lot of flack when in reality they are the parent who chose to stay, which is total opposite of what a single father experiences. So it is women being judged in both cases, rather than
rather than the
like
men.
their
Yeah, it's that men can do no wrong in our society, and that's a generalization, of course, right?
right, yes.
But that is, the one of the inequalities of our society is exactly what you've just said. Like, women are pitted against each other, so it's the women that have done something wrong. It's not the man,
Right.
even though in this case, and in most cases, it's completely the man. Right. But yet society wants us to be pitted against each other. It does not want women to support each other. It wants us to tear each other down. Right.
Right.
It greatly benefits the patriarchy if we do that. And it keeps men in an elevated position.
Exactly. So like she couldn't keep him in a house, so he had to, go wander off or something. So it's again her responsibility.
Yeah. Yeah. It's her fault that she drove him away. He wasn't happy. So.
Yeah, so he has
he's
to do it.
allowed to go find somebody outside of the marriage.
Right. And then it shows her in a fit of rage, like she killed her kids. It shows that you have to be this hysterical, like you cannot deal with a situation.
Yeah,
Giving
and
that
it's all because of a man, right?
Right.
So in a sense, and if I put my mother hat on to view this story, because I do find it a bit difficult to separate the idea here of being a mother versus being a woman. But, there's a few things I think about as a mother in this case. And one is that she's punished her kids. Like she's punished her kids rather than her husband. And I find that very insulting as a mother because, I would choose my kids over my husband. Sorry, no offense, husband. But I just think like there is a natural mothering instinct that goes deeper than society. Like it's nature, right? These nurturing mothering instincts, because I would even say I'm a self-admitted, I'm not a very nurturing person in general. But when it comes to my children, I have that like mama bear instinct. And that must be nature. Right. That's not that's nature versus nurture is what I'm trying to say here. And the fact that in this story, she's driven crazy by her husband, but then she takes it out on her children. Like, I do find that insulting. And I know, again, we could go into present day and there are situations like that. And we could talk about mental illness. Like there's many, many layers here. But I think just, looking at it as a mother, it's just kind of it's insulting to me that the story says that she kills her kids because she's mad at her husband.
Right. Yeah.
The other thing, with my mothering hat on, I just in terms of this story in general, like if I was to share this story with my kids, I think there's so many harmful messages in it. And it's not that I wouldn't necessarily share it with my kids. I think it's important that all kids understand history, right? And this could be a good story to share with my kids. And just for for listeners' background, I have 3 kids. They are 7, 5, and 2.5. So, probably a bit young anyways, and they would probably be like, horrified by this story. Probably a bit too early. But there's so many harmful messages in this, and it may be a good teaching opportunity to talk to them about, where this story came from and what its purpose was. But if people are still using it today in its original intended use, I don't know. I think that's harmful as a mother.
Right. Yeah. I think so. I'm not sure. Maybe I should reach out to people in Mexico. And if this podcast does reach out to people outside the US or even like in the US, and if anyone has heard this story, please email me or leave a comment on our Instagram that you have heard this, or if there's a variation, to know that if this story is still prevalent in different parts of South America, because I saw that there might be some variations in different countries in South America, not just like in Mexico.
Right.
So I think it would be good to know that if this story is still like being told, but in what version, if it's the exact same version.
With what purpose, right?
Right. Yeah.
Because it's hard to judge. Like, I can't judge people if they're using it or why they're using it or, what the cultural relevancy is to it. I just think if I took the story, the version that you shared and told my kids,
right.
I don't think that's a good way to instill the messages they're trying to get at. Because I think the message they're trying to get at was like, children, you need to listen to your parents and you need to come home so that you don't run into this lady at night. I think there's other more positive ways to get your kids to listen to you.
Yes. I mean, there's the boogeyman story types, those genre. It is there. Yeah. But however, I think in this one, it is similar. But, I feel like they have made this version, which I felt really, really bad for Maria in the story because she... And we don't know, like you said, about the mental health or, whatever her situation is. Maybe she is depressed, but it's just like she couldn't deal with that traumatic life event. And she had to do something. And she realized later that it wasn't like the right thing to do, obviously. But if I extrapolate that to the current day, or because, this is a story, so it has to be extreme to make a point. But in real life, it could be someone who didn't do, like a mom who didn't do something which the society expects of a mother. It doesn't have to be like killing your kids. It could just be like you skipped a meal or something like, you an imperfect mom.
Yeah. Well, I don't think there is a perfect mom.
Right.
But I agree with what you're saying here. It's, the story is really rooted in shame and guilt. And this is really indicative of how our society views women and views mothers, right?
Right.
And the value that is placed on mothering and all of that unpaid work.
Right. And when I said imperfect, obviously no one can see, but I did it like the air quotes because like the imperfect. However, I think it's like about the societal expectations of a mother. And I like you said that you are a mom of 3 kids. So do you have you ever felt that more was expected as a parent? You had more expectations from society compared to your husband?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I would say no, but I would say I'm probably in the minority on that. I just, in general, my personality, I have very high expectations for myself. And the other side of that is, I'm sure I have I have higher expectations for myself than my husband would. The other thing is my husband and I, we have a very equal partnership. So he literally does 50% of any unpaid work. I do 50%. We both have careers. We both raising our kids, doing drop off, pick up at daycares and schools, helping with homework, cleaning, cooking, all of that stuff.
Right.
But societies, and I don't know if it's some people have these self-imposed expectations on themselves and they just always feel like they can't live up to something. And I think you're right. Some households have that internally, but that definitely comes from somewhere. So that may be coming from other generations, how we were raised. And then, of course, our society and the media messages we get and, how to be the perfect mom. And then this also goes back to this, the warring factions of whether you're a stay-at-home mom or you're a working mom. And it's you can't be both. You can't be perfect in both. And all of your decisions are questioned, which is unfortunate. And, men don't get questioned in the same way. If they do any unpaid work, they're applauded. Right. Whereas women, you can't do enough. You can't possibly do enough. But I think for myself, I have high expectations for myself, but I'm also in a very equal partnership, so I don't feel a lot of pressure.
Okay, I think that's a great setup you have at your place, that everything is equal. So that's what your kids are looking at, and that's what they're absorbing in their subconscious.
Exactly.
And hopefully they'll continue to live in, when they grow up and live their own lives, independent lives, they'll continue to do the equal partnership work.
I hope so. And Shannon and I did talk about this on one episode, and it's this question of, how much of the messages are from your parents and how much of it is from your peer group and also the media, right? So I think as parents, I still think parents have a huge role to play in that and promoting equality within their household. But I do think at some point the peer group takes over that a little bit. And also media, the like kids these days, they're on their iPads and they have cell phones at age 10, and you can only protect them from that so much. So
Right. Yeah, I agree about both points, that the society, which does include media, impacts our values and actions. But it's good to observe equality at home, and that women do a lot more unpaid work, which is expected of them, and not from men to that extent. So I guess, like, coming back to the story, I was thinking that if I wanted to change the story a little bit, like make our own version where things are not as problematic, because right now it shows Maria as this, like bad mom or like a vengeful ghost because she's trying to kidnap kids. But also, I don't know if you noticed in the last line, the story calls her temptress, because I read this one variation where she also lures men to get revenge from her husband. So they have made her in this like a vengeful ghost, basically.
right.
And she's no longer a mom who was grieving her kids and who was crying and wailing, but now she's just a vengeful ghost. So if you want to change the story a little bit, what are the parts which you think you might want to take out?
Oh, I would rewrite
You're
the
like
whole
everything.
thing. Yeah, like let's rewrite this thing right now. All right, so, well, okay, we can keep the front part because okay. So the other thing I would ask is like, what is the moral of this story?
Right.
Because do we want to maintain the integrity of the moral of the story while promoting, less harmful messaging and less harmful labels of women and mothers? But if we just want to change the story because the whole thing is harmful, I would say fine, she gets swept off by this wealthy man, but to your point earlier, she was working on her own. And what did it say at the beginning? She was crafting, or she was surviving on her craft making ability.
Right.
So I say that her husband runs off with the princess from Spain. You go. Like, we don't want you, buddy.
Right,
and
bye.
she returns to her village with her sons, and she becomes a small business owner.
Right, yeah.
Like,
yeah.
sure, she's very talented. She can have financial independence through her craft.
Right.
So I think, that's what she does. She doesn't ever bother suing her husband for child support because she frankly doesn't want to owe him anything. She has a great support system in place to thrive in her village. And her sons become well-respected men who treat women and men well.
Right.
So
yes.
I think, that's how we end the story.
I would say I agree 95% of what you said. Because the only 5% is because I want the money. So, like if I have kids, and I would love, to see her like empowered and doing her own thing, but at least like give some money to the kids. Like obviously like not to her.
Yeah.
But,
no,
or like,
I'm just joking.
Yeah.
Because that's not realistic. Like I think in real life, you still get child support, especially because she had to obviously put her career on the back burner, right? Like he took her out. She didn't have a chance to lean into her career, so she kind of has to start from scratch again. So no, I think in like a realistic setting, yeah, absolutely, you're getting child support. And I don't want anyone to think that I'm trying to shame somebody or judging somebody for doing that. I mean, I would totally do that too. I'm just being like, power to her. She doesn't need him.
Right.
But,
I mean,
no.
Probably we can say they fell out of love from each other, and I want out of this marriage, and let's have a divorce. And I mean, all these things are like big terms for a kid's story. So I think what your version was, the husband left her and she went to her village and she did her own work and everyone was happy ever after. I think that's the perfect version of a kid's story. And if you want to add to the realistic part, that's when I was saying about the child support or alimony or like giving a divorce and stuff. But I think what you said would be a good, nice short story to like a bedtime story.
Yeah, I think it would have a very different moral than this original one.
Right, right. Yeah, I think so. But I mean, maybe we can kind of add something like when she went to village, the kids got lost one time, but then she found them and they realized that they shouldn't go out without her or something.
Exactly.
Just like adding one line there. Right. Yeah.
Perfect.
So
We solved it.
we solved it. Yeah. Well, I don't know where it started, but whoever is listening, and if you are still telling the story to your kids, maybe you can try the new version which we created.
That's right.
Right.
May not be as effective, but effective in different ways.
Yes. I mean, yeah, it'll have a different
Not
message
for
for
scaring
sure.
the children.
Yeah, the kids are like, yeah, what's the problem in this story? Everything
that
seems
sounds
fine.
great.
Yeah, that's true. I really liked our discussion, and I really like, whatever points you made. And obviously, we can't see each other right now because we are in different countries and doing it remote. And I was clicking my fingers, but I didn't want to click too loud because then the audio would be weird. Like whatever points you were making, I'd say, yes, that's true. You got it. So I was like totally in, what do you call, I'd say concord. Like, yes, that's the point I was in agreement. Yes. I was trying to make as well. So I'm so glad that I invited you. And then
Thank you.
I'm so glad that you agreed to,
Of course.
to come. I think it's really important to reach out to different people and hear their perspective, because it might be that I might say something, or I might see in the story something which you might not, and then the other way around. So it's great to get different perspective.
Collaboration is so important, and I think what you're doing with your podcast is so unique and interesting and inspiring as well. So I look forward to hearing, listening, and tuning into more episodes.
Thank you very much. That's very kind. So do you want to tell where our listeners can find your podcast?
Yeah, absolutely. So anyone who's interested can find the Feminist Mommies podcast anywhere you stream your podcasts. I usually stream through Apple. It seems to be one of the more popular ones. You can also find us on Instagram, where Shannon and I are quite active there. Our handle is at Feminist Mommies. And we can also be reached through email, feminist.mommies@gmail.com.
Great, thank you. And listen to their podcast, and you don't have to be a parent to listen. I listen to it as an uncle, and I find it very helpful.
Awesome, thank you. It's just, there's so many messages in there that are not specific to parents, and that are just important for our society in general, right? To move towards equality.
Right. And I think like just listening to different things, you might pick on or like a message might resonate with you, which wasn't like originally intended for you, but it can still resonate with you. So on that note, I again want to wish Happy Mother's Day to everyone listening, all the moms, and Happy Mother's Day to you, Vanessa, as well. We acknowledge Mother's Day is not always a day of celebration for everyone, and it can be a difficult day for some people.
Mother's Day, while it's viewed as a very happy holiday, it is actually can be quite hard for a lot of women, right? Whether they're mothers or not. I mean, there's so many women out there who are trying to be mothers and who are having challenges, or people who have lost their mothers, or who have strained relationships with their mothers. So, it's just something to keep in mind that, it's not always a happy holiday necessarily, or an easy holiday for everybody, but
right.
Happy Mother's Day to all the hardworking moms out there. And if this is a challenging holiday for you, then my thoughts are with you.
Right. Yes. I totally agree. And I'm glad you said it. And then I cannot stress that enough. I wish you all a great day filled with love, peace, and comfort. So on that note, bye for now. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Let me know your thoughts on the story and our discussion by emailing me on WokeTalesPodcast.com or through social media at WokeTales Podcast on Instagram and WokeTales Pod on Twitter. And please rate, review, and like WokeTales Podcast, and don't forget to subscribe so you can easily access our weekly stories. If you have any story recommendations, or if you want to come dissect and analyze a story with me, give me a shout out on email or social media, because whatever you do, keep dissecting and keep analyzing.